Glass Bird. Hello, everyone. Hello, night owls. Here is a little story for those of you who like to stay up late or who just can't fall asleep. The Girl with the Glass Bird was written by Esme Kerr. Chapter 1. Fish for Breakfast. Edie crouched on her bedroom windowsill, training her binoculars on the three boys by the stone pond. Their names were Lyle, Jason, and Tom, and she hated them. They were like foxes, thin and cunning, with eyes that flashed through mops of filthy hair. It was nearly a month since Edie had come to live with her cousins at Folly Farm, and she had learned to keep out of their way. If she wanted to know what they were doing, she spied. She peered down at them now, making a quick adjustment to her lenses. Lyle, the eldest at 13, was holding a fishing net. His twin brothers watched as he thrust it into the middle of the pond and stabbed it into the water. The stick started to bend and writhe, and the others grabbed it too. 3 pairs of hands pulling the jerking net from the lilies. Edie saw the fish tossed, gasping onto the grass, and dropped her binoculars in horror. They had caught Tilly. "Pigs!" she choked, stumbling to her bedroom door. "Pigs, pigs, pigs!" Tilly was Edie's goldfish. She had grown huge, as long as a ruler, since Edie had brought her from her London tank and put her to live in the dirty stone pond. Edie fed her every morning and loved to watch the metallic flash of her skin as she moved through the murky water. She was proud of the way Tilly had grown into her new country life, even if she herself had not. At least one of us is flourishing, she had thought grimly, when considering her own failure to settle at Folly Farm. "Let her go!" she shouted as she crashed down the stairs 3 at a time, but she was too late. When she reached the pond, the boys and Tilly had gone. The camp, she thought desperately, veering off at her breakneck speed toward the woods. The boys' camp was dank, made out of rusting corrugated iron sheets, camouflaged with peat and bracken. Edie had discovered it only last week, when she had been exploring on her own and saw Lyle's ATV parked outside. Lyle said if she ever came back, he'd tie her up. As she got nearer, she saw feathers of smoke rising from the bracken, and a nauseating smell flooded toward her. She felt faint, but staggered on. "How could you? How could you?" Lyle looked up, smirking, and tossed a cigarette into the campfire. "You're just in time for breakfast," he said, turning the fish in the pan. The twins, sitting on either side of him, giggled nervously. It was Lyle who'd had the idea of cooking Tilly, but something told them they would be in trouble if their mother found out. When there was trouble, the twins usually took Lyle's share of it. They were 9, and that was the deal if they wanted to play with him. Now they looked at Edie with frightened eyes. Lyle smiled, showing pointed teeth. "Go on, eat it," he said, pointing to the pan. "You like fish." "Beast!" Eddie shouted, hurling herself on him with flailing fist. Lyle was thin, but bigger than Edie and strong as wire. He stepped back, caught her arms and twisted them behind her back. Give her some! The twins looked at him, uncertain. Edie was struggling and kicking, but Lyle had her tight. Let me go, you pig! Give her some, Lyle snarled. Tom poked his stick in the fire. He looked as though he wanted the game to stop, but Jason stood up and lifted the pan from the flames. Go on, see if she likes it. Jason pulled off some of the fish with his fingers. It was still rubbery, half raw. Lyle's hands were twisting Edie's wrists behind her back, burning her flesh. She kept her mouth shut tight, willing herself not to scream as the lump of pink fish was thrust under her nose. When she threw up, it went everywhere, into the pan, over Jason's hand, over Lyle's sneakers. Afterward, she was aware of Tom's bowed head and of a strange, fearful look in Jason's eyes. But Lyle stood gazing at her calmly, wiping his shoes on the leaves while he lit another cigarette. As she ran away, his expressionless voice swam after her. Go on, run away. Run back to Granny. Run back to your blind old Babka. Edie stumbled on, out of the woods and across the field, then collapsed, exhausted by the pond. The damp grass soaked through her jeans, but she did not move. She sat frozen, staring at the motionless gray water, thinking of Tilly writhing in the net. Tilly smoking in the pan. She hated Lyle as she had never hated anyone before, and he was always there. Wherever she went, she could feel his pale eyes following her. And next week, it would be even worse. Next week, when half-term break was over, she would be starting at his school, going with him every day on a bus into the local town. Don't expect me to look after you, he said to her, though people will expect things of you as my cousin. What will they expect of me? Edie wondered with a shudder. Lyle had been expelled from 2 schools already. Savages. That's what her grandmother had said after she and Edie had stayed at Folly Farm one Easter. After 3 nights, they had both been glad to escape. A filthy, cold house and 3 filthy, cold children. Babka had muttered on the train home, pursing her lips over her sweetened coffee. When Edie had been sent to live at Folly Farm, Babka had refused to look her in the eye as she directed her what to pack. You'll be going to school again. That's what you wanted, was all she had said. I wanted to stay at my old school, Edie had replied. I don't want to go to school with them. But Babka, defeated by blindness, had just shrugged. Folly Farm was good enough for Edie, though not for Kitty. Babka had arranged for her fat old cat to go to an animal shelter. Why can't I take her with me? Edie had pleaded. Your cousins would not be kind to her, Babka replied. You don't care if they're not kind to me? Edie said quietly. Edie had lived as long as she could remember with Babka in a little flat perched at the top of a gray building near Hyde Park. There was a Chinese restaurant in the street below them, with gold lights in the window, and next to it a Polish grocer where Babka would buy jars of beetroot and red cabbage and, on good days, little cakes with bright yellow custard. Edie had gone to a school a few streets away, but when she was 9, her grandmother had started teaching her at home. Babka didn't want anyone coming to the flat. She didn't want anyone to know that she was going blind. If they found out, she had warned, they'll take you away. But Edie had hated the long, friendless afternoons with Babka drilling her impatiently in whatever subject took her mood. She was never allowed to invite her old school friends to tea. Babka said that sometimes you needed to be secret to be safe. But the social services had found out about Babka's blindness in the end, so Babka had been sent to a home. She'd refused to go to the one they found for her in London. I want to die in a room with a view, Babka had said, and she had dug into her meager savings to make her wish come true. Babka had ended up in a home near Oxford, but Edie had been given no choice about where she was to live, and Folly Farm was just as bad as she had feared. Things will be easier when you start school and make some friends of your own, Aunt Sophia had said in her vague, careless way. You can bring girls back to play. Somehow, though, even Aunt Sophia seemed to understand that her going to school with Lyle would not be easy. Edie stared at the pond. She had betrayed Tilly by not keeping her feelings secret. Babka was right. You had to be secret to be safe. Lyle had killed Tilly because he had seen Edie feeding her. If he could do that to a fish friend, what would he do to a human one? Edie shook her head. She would never bring anyone back to Folly Farm, never. She thought with sudden longing of the flat in London and the street full of people. Here there was nothing. The village was more than a mile away, hidden beyond the woods. Wherever Edie looked, all she could see was green, an endless mass of green rising around her like a prison. Was this what Babka meant by a view? She gazed out at it, the stale taste of sick on her tongue. Her body was aching, but some force rose inside her, and she knew she could not stay here any longer. She took her cell phone out of her pocket and looked again at the number of Babka's nursing home. But it was useless. There was no signal in the valley, and it was no good calling Babka. Babka would tell her she had to stay and make the best of it. If Edie turned up at the nursing home, Babka would send her back. Her stomach felt hollow. She thought of Babka's kitchen with the rusty gold cans and the glass cake stand, and the smell of cooking that rose to meet you as the elevator doors opened onto the thin concrete corridor of the 6th floor. Then she sat up with a start, thinking of the cracked stone pig beside the front door. Babka had always kept the key hidden under the pig. It would still be there. Babka wouldn't have moved it. She could let herself in, then on the block she was sure to find someone to help her. Maybe the Polish grocer would come to her rescue. So long as she could get back to the flat, she would be all right. London was full of friendly people. She heard Lyle's words floating back to her. Go on, run away, run back to your blind old Babka. I will, she thought defiantly. I will run away, but not where you think. Chapter 2. Blood Families. Several hundred miles away from Folly Farm, the golden October sun was slanting into the drawing room of a tall Mayfair townhouse, dappling an interior of gilt, marble, and chintz. Here stood Charles Rodriguez, one of the city's richest and most secretive art dealers, welcoming one of the richest and most secretive of his clients. Thirsty? Parched, Prince Stolanov sighed, sinking into an armchair. He watched silently, his foot drumming restlessly on the floor, as his friend mixed the drinks. Charles threw him a questioning glance. Something tells me you haven't come to buy a picture. Quite right, replied the prince. I've come to you as a friend, Charles, in need of help. Charles inclined his head. I have long thought of my friends as my family on account of my blood family being so thoroughly unsatisfactory. I didn't know you had any blood family. Everyone has blood family. I just chose not to play with mine. Of course, you have no children, the prince murmured. None that I know about, Charles smiled. I wish sometimes that I was in your position. Charles raised an eyebrow. I hope that your enchanting little Anastasia has not been giving you trouble. Not trouble exactly, but, well, you know what it's like, Charles. It's her first time away from home without a bodyguard, and one can't help worrying. You can't help worrying, Stolly. The British tradition is to send your children to boarding school, then forget all about them. The prince shook his head. This country is barbaric. I wish I'd never agreed to let Ansie go away to school. I thought she wanted to go. She didn't want to live at home with her stepfather, and her mother didn't want her roaming the world with me. Boarding was the compromise, and Venetia insisted it should be her old school, even though she never liked it there herself. Why are English people so attached to places where they have been unhappy? I had a letter from Anastasia a couple of weeks ago, and she sounded quite cheerful, Charles said. Anastasia was his goddaughter. That must have been before the problems started. Problems? I spoke to her on the telephone yesterday, and she was in quite a rattled state. I'm afraid she's being teased, Charles. Horribly teased. The prince gave the words the weight of torture. Charles looked at him thoughtfully. Go on. Well, it might not amount to anything, of course, but Anastasia's reported things going missing. Nothing valuable, just pens, homework, a diary. But it seems to go on and on. It's, oh, syrup and pancakes, Charles. I know it sounds nonsense, and it probably is, but she's usually so meticulous about her things. At home, she even keeps her books in alphabetical order. You know what she's like, dreamy in some ways, but well ordered in others. So it does seem odd she should suddenly start losing everything. And if it is a question of her being teased, then you want to cap the knees of whoever's doing it, Charles concluded, smiling. It might strike you I'm being overprotective, but she is my only child, and I reserve the right to protect her. For God's sake, what else are parents for? Charles opened his mouth as though to answer this question, then seemed to think better of it. The prince was mid-flow. It's not easy to judge the situation. I tell you, Charles, this English school is quite absurdly old-fashioned, even by your standards. It's run on some modish principle of keeping children cosseted from the outside world. No computers or mobile telephones. Letters home every Sunday. No television. Even the school uniform looks as if it belongs to the 1950s. You should see the blue tunics they wear. You probably didn't choose it for the uniform, Charles said. I didn't choose it, period, the prince replied. It's like a prison. This business about not being allowed mobile telephones is grotesque. They have to ring from a telephone booth in a freezing corridor at a prescribed time, and most nights the bell rings for bed before Ansie can get to the front of the queue. The older girls get to barge in front of the younger ones. Always my little Ansie is shunned to the back of the queue. But yesterday we managed to talk and I could hear the unhappiness in her voice. She was trying not to cry, and she wouldn't tell me exactly what was wrong. You see, Charles, she wants to prove to her fusspot papa that she can manage on her own. She'd made such a song and dance about not having a personal protection officer and wanting to live as a normal schoolgirl, and now she's determined to prove she can cope, even when the evidence suggests otherwise, Charles concluded. Exactment, the prince replied. Have you spoken to the school? Charles asked. Yes, I talked to the dragon headmistress, a Miss Forthingay, and she promised she'd look into it. But when I called again a week later, she gave me some spiel about school matters being best left to the school. My fear is that they will do nothing at all. The prince turned his drink in his hands. I think, Charles, that I am going to have to follow this up myself. What do you plan to do? Turn up and search everyone's drawers? Charles asked, looking amused. Don't be an idiot, the prince replied impatiently. This is a job for a professional. My first thought was to approach a member of the staff and pay them to keep a special eye on Ansie. But I have become rather nervous of the dragon finding me out, or Venetia. So now I have a much better idea. We import a child to be her special friend and protector. We, said Charles. We import a child? Correct. I want to plant a child in the school to watch the other girls day and night and find out what the devil's going on. It shouldn't take a clever urchin more than a few weeks to get to the bottom of it. It could be that Ansie just being careless, but if I can get proof that someone's persecuting her, then you don't think an urchin would stick out rather among the rich girls of Knight's Haddon? Not a clever one. Anyway, with brains can fit in anywhere. You surely don't need me to tell you that. Charles replied, and I take it you don't want Anastasia's mother to find out. For heaven's sake, Charles, what kind of fool do you take me for? You know Venetia's mental health is fragile at the best of times. Any anxiety over Anastasia could tip her over the edge. I'm sorry, Charles said quietly. I thought she was better. So did I. But her brute of a husband has sent her back into the arms of her doctors. Ansie knows better than to trouble her with this, and so do I. Besides, Venetia's convinced Ansie's safe there. After all, it was her old school, and she loves the fact it's hidden away in the middle of a huge park, miles from anywhere. Aren't you reassured by that too? Yes and no. I would prefer to have my own people on the premises and to set my own rules around my daughter's freedom. So, my friend, are you going to help me in this matter? Find a suitable waif to be playmate and protector for your favorite goddaughter. My dear Stolly, Charles protested, you're surely not serious. You seem to forget I am an art dealer, not a child recruitment officer. What you propose is quite outlandish and perhaps even outside the law. Nonsense, said Stolly. You find the child. I offer to educate her, at least for a term or two. Lemon squeezy. Auntie told me that there was a spare bed in her dormitory. I want it filled before I return to Russia. But Stolly, no, Charles, I have to know if my daughter is being persecuted at school. You've helped me out of more awkward spots before now, the prince reminded him gently, and I don't believe I've ever given you cause to regret it. Charles Rodriguez inclined his head. Friendship didn't come into it. He was one of nature's fixers, and the prince was his paymaster. All you have to do is find me a smart 11-year-old girl capable of keeping a secret. Surely, Charles, one of those can't be so hard to find. Chapter 3. A Chance Encounter. It was dark by the time Edie passed the church and started along the road that led to the small country station. The warm lights of the village soon paled behind her. Ahead, there was only the weak beam of her flashlight dancing on the asphalt. Edie wished she had brought a stronger flashlight. She had never known darkness like this. In London, the street lights beneath her bedroom window had glowed all night, and she had always fallen asleep to the hum of voices and music drifting from the street below. But here there was nothing, no sound, no light. Even the moon had retreated behind a cloud. The station had seemed near when they had made the journey in Aunt Sophia's car, but now the road stretched on forever, in a tunnel of black. She kept her eyes fixed on the flickering flashlight beam and tried to think ahead. To the flat in Queen's Way, to the key hidden under the cracked stone pig by the door. Her back was aching under the weight of her rucksack, and she could feel the straps cutting like wire into her shoulders. She decided to stop and put on some extra layers, thinking it would make her load lighter. She slid the rucksack from her back, then knelt down on the thin grass verge beside the hedgerow and started tugging out a jumble of hastily packed clothes. But then she heard a low humming noise, which rose swiftly to a roar, and suddenly found herself blinded by the headlights of a car. Edie screamed, stumbling back into the hedge in terror. She heard the engine stop, and when she removed her hands from her face, the lights had dimmed to a soft yellow. She looked up and saw a man standing over her, reaching out a hand. His face was hidden by shadow, but she felt the softness of his overcoat as he bent down to help her to her feet. "I'm relieved to see I didn't hit you," he observed calmly. Edie just stared. "I take it that belongs to you?" the man inquired, pointing to her rucksack. Edie nodded and watched as he picked it up and retrieved the bits of clothing from the grass. "Aren't you rather young to be out at this time?" he said, handing them back to her. Edie shrugged. She wondered if he was going to start probing, but his next question took her unawares. "I'm trying to find Folly Farm. I've been there before, but I think I must have taken a wrong turn out of the village. Do you know it?" "I'm sorry, I never heard of it. I'm not from around here," Edie said, the lies tripping from her tongue. "I'm camping with some friends up the lane. I better get back or they'll wonder what happened to me." As she spoke, she stuffed her clothes into her rucksack and swung it on her back. Then she picked up her flashlight and marched on in the direction of the station. Only when she heard the engine start into life behind her and the car drive off toward the village did she clench her fist in a little mind of triumph. Edie felt bolder having survived this challenge. A careless word would have given her away, but the stranger had clearly fallen for her story. Even so, the fact that he was on his way to Folly Farm made her even more anxious to reach the station. She looked at her watch and saw she had less than 12 minutes until the London train. The next one was an hour later, and by then Aunt Sophia would have noticed she had gone. If a visitor told her that he'd seen a child hurrying through the night with a rucksack, she would be straight on her trail. She pointed her flashlight into the darkness and hurried on. Finally, she came to a small cluster of cottages. Then the lane turned and she saw the lights of the station up ahead. A surge of excitement shot through her, then alarm when she saw the train already at the platform. She bent her back under the weight of the rucksack and started to run. She heard the slamming of train doors, but not the footsteps gaining quietly on the road behind her. It was only at the sound of a familiar menacing laugh that she turned to see three thin, feral faces leering at her in the flashlight beam. Gotcha, said Lyle. Before Edie could scream, his hand closed over her mouth, and she heard the shrill of a whistle as the train slid away into the night. The front door at Folly Farm was never locked. It opened into the long, low kitchen, where Sophia Fairlight, Edie's aunt, was huddled by the wood-burning stove, clutching a telephone and a glass of gin. "Oh, Lyle, darling, is that you? And have you found her?" she called out as she heard a door slam. "Please say yes." "No," came the reply, and no. Sophia, recognizing the voice, stood up with an expression of languid delight. "Cousin Charles, what a treat! Do you know I had completely forgotten you were coming?" "How flattering," replied the tall, velvet-collared man. "But I remember now," Sophia went on, draping her arms around his neck. "You had a funeral nearby." "Something like that." "Oh, darling, you're always so mysterious," she sighed. "Good," Charles said. "I would hate to think I had lost my touch. Where are all your ghastly menfolk?" "Tony's away, leaving me to cope all on my own," Sophia replied in a tone of theatrical self-pity. "What a treat." "Don't be unpleasant. You've never seen the point of him." "I'm sorry, my dear, but you can't expect me to like the man who took away the one cousin whose company I could bear and buried her in the middle of the dank countryside. Why couldn't you have found yourself a banker and stayed in London?" Sophia did not rise to this familiar bait. "Are you spending the night?" "Certainly not. I've booked a hotel in Chagford, but I'll stay for dinner." "Oh, God, darling, I wonder if there is any. Where are your horrible sons? Can't we eat them?" Sophia grimaced. "Ugh, you'd have to chew them forever. They'd be so tough." "They really are horrible. They've been so vile to Edie that she's run away and now they're out looking for her." "Who's Edie?" "Charles, darling, don't be dim. It doesn't suit you. Edith Wilson, my little orphaned niece. And your cousin, though I know you've never held our family in much store." "What's she doing here? I thought you hardly saw her." "She comes to live with us. It's a complete nightmare. She hates it here, and it's furious all the time, and the boys hate her. But—" Sophia shrugged. "Oh, darling, what can I do? The long and short of it is that I'm her guardian, and this is her new home." "How old is she?" "11," Sophia replied. "And aren't you worried about her?" "Not really. She's bound to have made for the station." "I'd better go after her," Charles said, putting down his glass. "I think I saw her on the road." "Oh, don't bother, darling. The boys will hunt her down." "Why didn't you go?" "Me?" Sophia sounded amazed by the suggestion. "I don't really feel this drama is anything to do with me. You wouldn't understand, Charles. You're not a parent. But children have to sort these things out by themselves. There's no point in us getting involved. I told the boys they had to promise to be nice to Edie from now on. But the trouble is, they're wild." "That, my dear, is because no one has tamed them," Charles replied. "Is this them now?" he added, hearing scuffling in the hall. A moment later the door blew open, and through it appeared the child he had met earlier that night, with Lyle and the twins dragging her by the arms like prison guards. Charles looked at her, intrigued. He saw what had prompted his flash of recognition by the roadside. She had her mother's eyes, the same intense yet furtive stare. But it was the change in her appearance that struck him most. In the car headlights, Her thin ivory face had been lit with adventure, but now it was sallow and streaked with tears. Charles did not move. "Let her go," he said. The boys released her, and Edie pulled away, rubbing her arms where their hands had gripped her and thanking Charles with a sullen stare. "We caught her by the station," Jason said proudly. "We got there just in time. She was going to get the train to London." "Bet she wishes she had," Lyle sneered. "Oh, boys, do try and be a bit nicer," Aunt Sophia said feebly as Edie stormed upstairs. Charles looked at the slammed door, and something in him stirred. It was not so much pity that he felt as an agreeable inkling that he might be in luck. This was a child, he calculated silently, in need of a new master. Chapter 4. Beware the sideways move. Edie sat in the car dressed in her stiff new clothes, with her trunk stowed on the back seat, the school uniform, blue tunic, yellow shirts, blue bloomers, Edie had thought, wrinkling her nose in disgust, and gray tights, had arrived in a series of brown paper parcels, each one to Edie's mind containing something even more frumpy than the last. Everything had been unpacked and sorted by Cousin Charles's silent Spanish maid. Her handkerchiefs had been counted and ironed. Name tapes had been sewn into her socks. Even her tuck box had been neatly engraved with her initials. And yet Edie felt ill-prepared. "Remember, Edith, you're not going to Knight's Hayden as an ordinary schoolgirl," said Cousin Charles, honking at a cyclist on Hyde Park Corner. "I know that. I'm not a schoolgirl. I'm a spy," Edie said, rehearsing her brief. This is one way of seeing it," Charles replied, smiling. "But you said—" "You are a spy, but you are also Anastasia's servant. It is the prince you would do well to remember who is paying your fees." Edie scowled. She did not want to be anyone's servant, least of all to a girl her own age, and she did not like Charles's warning tone. More secret servant than secret service," he continued. "The roles are distinct, but not dissimilar. The important thing is not to get too close to anyone. If you start forming sentimental attachments to the other girls, it will cloud your judgment. And that applies to Anastasia too. You must act like her friend, but never forget that you are in fact her servant. And a servant, as you will shortly learn, can never be a friend." Edie looked out forlornly at the whirl of traffic. It felt like just her strain of luck to be going to school with the specific instruction not to make any real friends at all. She had been secretly elated when Cousin Charles had offered to take charge of her education. Such was her excitement at escaping from her cousins, she hadn't thought to ask what sort of school he was going to send her to. It was only when putting her on the train to London that Aunt Sophia had said, "He wants to send you to boarding school. God knows why, but you might as well give it a go, darling. It's not as though you've been very happy with us." "Of course I haven't," Edie had thought sullenly. "Your sons are savages. But boarding school?" The only person she knew who had gone to a boarding school was Lyle, who had lasted less than 3 weeks before being expelled for reasons even he wouldn't talk about. "The school is famously strict, and I don't want you stepping out of line," Charles went on, his eyes fixed on the road. "Your job is to blend in." "But I thought you said I might have to break the rules." "I said you can break any rules you like, so as long as you break them quietly. And that includes your cell phone." strictly against regulations, but you'll need it to keep me informed of your findings. I don't want to hear it's been confiscated, Edith. Keep it well hidden. It's your first test. I don't see why you're not allowed them anyway. The school prides itself on keeping the world at bay. Parents like to think of their daughters being protected. From what? Oh, I don't know, said Charles with sudden impatience. And don't whine. I've only told you to hold on to your phone. Edie snorted. She thought one cell phone was pretty poor payment for the job at hand, and the new phone he had given her with such ceremony was little improvement on her last. She had hoped at the very least Cousin Charles might equip her with some useful gadgets, devices for secretly recording people or listening through walls. But he had met this suggestion with contempt. Romantic nonsense, Edith. You've been watching too many films. I've told you, all you'll need at your eyes are your eyes and ears. Her phone didn't even have a camera. Cousin Charles had put Edie's eyes to the test during the few days they had just spent together in Mayfair. One afternoon, he made her face the drawing room wall and tell him what was in the room. He looked surprised when she listed every piece of furniture. When Babka started going blind, I became her second pair of eyes, Edie had explained with a hint of pride. She'd ask me what I could see, and she always seemed to know if I'd left anything out. She has trained you well, Cousin Charles had said, impressed. By way of contrast, he had given Edie no training at all until this last-minute pep talk. It's impossible that Anastasia is simply imagining that she is being teased, in which case your job is simply to get in there and act like her friend and stop her feeling strange and lonely. Remember, this is a child who's used to traveling around the world in a private jet and being waited on hand and foot. She's made a fuss about wanting to manage her on her own, and she's not managing. You don't think she's being teased at all? Asked Edie in a puzzled voice. I thought... I don't know if she is being teased, said Charles, nor does her father. We can't know, as we're not there. It's your job to find out. And if I think she is being teased, said Edie, then what do I do about it? First, you have to discover who is doing the teasing. If, for instance, someone really is messing with her possessions, you probably have to catch them in the act. Without telling anyone what I'm up to? Exactly. In the end, it's about covering your tracks. To that end, you can lie all you like, although it's best to stick to the same one. Sometimes the only thing you have to go on is the fact of a deception. You have to work backward from there. Remember everything, Edith. Never let anything go. Most mysteries are solved by attention to the most trivial seeming details. Privately, Edie thought the whole affair was trivial. Cousin Charles talked as though it were quite natural for a father to send another child into a school to investigate whether or not someone was stealing his daughter's pencils. But Edie thought it was plain weird. Charles needn't worry about her and Anastasia becoming friends. Edie could not imagine liking someone so spoiled. You say she's always traveling, but where's Anastasia's home? She asked. Moscow, Paris, the south of France. Her father's got houses everywhere, Charles said, sounding bored, and her mother lives in Yorkshire. Edie was intrigued. She wondered if Anastasia ever felt homeless, having so many homes to choose from. And does she have a Russian accent? She asked. Certainly not, Charles replied. I told you, her mother's English, and the prince was at school with me. He sounds more English than the queen. You say she's dreamy, but she keeps all her things in perfect order and arranges her books alphabetically, and that she never loses anything, Edie said, thinking over the information she had been given. Yet isn't it the case that dreamy people always lose things? You have a lot to learn, Edith. People's characters are not so easy to define. Babka thinks they are, Edith replied. She says there are good people and bad people. She doesn't believe in shades of gray. Cousin Charles gave a derisive laugh, but then his face suddenly darkened. Babka, blow it, he said, checking his watch. We're running late. I might have to take you to see her another time. Edie looked stricken. But it's on the way, and you promised. All right, we'll go, Cousin Charles gave in grumpily. But remember in the future, Edith, never pay any attention to a promise unless it's been made by someone you know you can trust. It was raining when they arrived at the St. Benedict nursing home, a bare, red brick villa on the outskirts of Oxford. The reception area smelled of cabbage, and there was a cart piled with bedpans parked beside the desk. I'll take a walk around the garden and come back for you in half an hour, Cousin Charles said, turning away with distaste. Edie felt relieved. She had an instinct he and Babka would not get on. A moment later, a nurse appeared and led her to Babka's room. Edie gave a start when she saw it. She had expected something drab, in keeping with the rest of the home, but instead it was filled with a bright confusion of clutter and colors. Pictures and ornaments, books, china, and gold-threaded tapestries, and quilts from the flat in London. Babka was sitting at a small table in the corner in the glow of a heavily shaded lamp. When Edie came in, she looked up, unsmiling, from the chess game she had been playing against herself. They tried to take them all away, she said, gesturing blindly at her possessions. But I say I go on the hunger strike. Edie sat on the end of the bed, and Babka reached out a hand and felt her face. You have been unhappy, she said. Are your cousins being bad to you? I'm not staying there anymore. I'm going to boarding school, Edie said. Babka's face hardened. Boarding school? Who's paying for that? I don't know, Edie lied. She did not want to tell her grandmother about her secret mission. Edie knew she would be contemptuous, but what could Babka do? She could offer Edie no alternative. What a lot of things you don't know, which makes two of us. No, protested Edie, not you, Babka. You know everything. Not anymore, Babka said bitterly. It's falling away. There's no necessity here to hold on to what you know. She turned away, nodding toward the chessboard. But I still have the game, she said deftly, feeling the pieces as she moved them back into their starting positions. You be white this time. Edie did not want to play chess. She wanted to talk. I haven't got long, she began, but Babka silenced her with a curt wave of her hand. Edie pulled up a chair to the table and moved a pawn. Babka had never taught Edie how to play chess. You cannot touch chess, you can only learn. You cannot teach chess, you can only learn. Slowly study the moves, Edith, and work out the rules. Edie had done this, watching Babka play with the Polish grocer down the street, in the room behind his shop. When Edie had learned enough, she and Babka had started playing together, always in silence, always with the clock. Edie did not enjoy chess, but Babka wouldn't play anything else. Give us 20, Babka said, handing Edie a stopwatch. But in the end, it took Edie only 10 minutes to lose. You were afraid of losing a piece, and so you lost the game, Babka said. It often happens that way. Then she raised a hand, and her fingers reached out, trembling as if feeling something in the air. There is a dark night in the room, she announced, looking up with unseeing eyes. Edie turned to see Cousin Charles standing in the doorway. She made a motion to say something, but he put his finger to his lips, then tapped his watch and left the room. "That was Cousin Charles," Edie said when he had gone. "He's taken me to the school. Oh, Babka, there's so much to tell you, and now there's no time." Babka nodded. "Don't fret. You are ready for school, I think, but I would take your Cousin Charles with a pinch of salt. Be prepared for the sideways move." Then she reached back to the board and moved her knight. And that is the end of chapter 5, my dear friends, and I shall pick up again tomorrow. Until next time, friends. Ta-ta!